The landscape of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is built on cosmic battles and multiversal threats, but its soul has always been anchored in the intimate, quiet moments between characters who have walked through fire together. One of the most heartbreaking and often overlooked sequences occurs at the conclusion of Avengers Endgame. As Steve Rogers prepares to step onto the quantum platform to return the Infinity Stones, the atmosphere is strangely casual for most of the group. Sam Wilson is relaxed, joking about the 5-second turnaround. Professor Hulk is focused on the mechanics. But if you look closely at Bucky Barnes, the energy is entirely different. While everyone else expects a quick return, Bucky stands there with a heavy silence that suggests he already knows the truth. He isn't waiting for a friend to return from a mission. He is watching a brother walk toward his final destination. This raises a profound question. How did Bucky know? In a world of super soldiers and gods, the most powerful thing on that platform wasn't the quantum technology, but a silent language shared between two men who had been together since the 1930s. When you grow up with someone, when you survive the Great Depression and fight side by side in a world war, you develop a shorthand that renders spoken words almost obsolete. It is a connection forged in trauma, loyalty, and a shared history that spans nearly a century. As Steve prepares to leave, the dialogue they exchange seems like lighthearted banter to an outsider. But to them, it was a secret code, a verbal ritual that signaled the end of an era. The specific exchange, "Don't do anything stupid until I get back," and "How can I? You're taking all the stupid with you," is more than just a witty callback. To understand its weight, we have to travel back to 1943, to the streets of Brooklyn. Before the super soldier serum, before the shield, and before the Winter Soldier, there were just two kids from New York. In the first Avenger, right before Bucky leaves for England to fight in World War II, he says these exact words to a then frail Steve Rogers. At that moment, it was a protective warning from a bigger brother to a stubborn friend who didn't know how to walk away from a fight. It was a way of saying, "Stay safe, because I might not come back to save you." It was their version of a goodbye that acknowledged the high probability of death without ever having to say the word. Fast forward over 80 years to the quantum platform in the aftermath of the battle against Thanos. When Steve Rogers looks at Bucky and repeats those same words, the roles are reversed, but the meaning has deepened. By using that specific phrase, Steve wasn't just making a joke, he was invoking their goodbye code. He was telling Bucky that this time, the one going away wouldn't be coming back, at least not as the man he was. It was a moment of profound vulnerability and mutual understanding. Steve was asking for Bucky's permission to finally stop fighting, to finally live the life he had been denied for nearly a century. And Bucky, through his quiet acceptance, gave him that blessing. This is why Bucky's reaction to Steve's departure is so distinct from Sam's. While Sam is genuinely confused when the 5-second timer passes and Steve doesn't reappear, Bucky remains composed. He doesn't panic. He doesn't rush to the controls. He simply turns his gaze toward the bench in the distance. He was the only person on that field who understood that Captain America's mission was over, but Steve Rogers' life was finally beginning. For Bucky, seeing the elderly Steve on that bench wasn't a shock, it was a relief. It was the confirmation that his best friend had finally found the peace they both had been chasing since they were boys in Brooklyn. The depth of this bond is what makes their story the most tragic and beautiful arc in the MCU. They were both men out of time, relics of a bygone era struggling to find their place in a world of aliens and synthetic humans. For years, they were each other's only anchor to their true selves. Bucky was the person who knew Steve before the world called him a hero, and Steve was the only person who remembered Bucky before the world called him a monster. Their relationship transcends the typical sidekick dynamic. They are two halves of a single history. When Steve chose to stay in the past, he wasn't abandoning Bucky. He was trusting him to carry on as a man who was no longer a weapon, but a human being with his own agency. The stupid code is a reflection of their shared resilience. It highlights the fact that despite everything they lost, their families, their youth, their sanity, they never lost their core identity. They were still those same kids from the 1930s, using humor to mask the terrifying reality of their lives. That final exchange was a way to ground themselves in their shared past one last time before stepping into their separate futures. It was a bridge between the 1940s and the end of time, a reminder that no matter how much the world changed, their friendship was the one constant in an ever-shifting universe. If we look at the emotional psychology of this moment, it reveals a level of selflessness that is rarely captured in blockbuster cinema. Bucky had every reason to want Steve to stay. Steve was his primary support system, the man who had dragged him back from the brainwashing of Hydra and stood by him when the rest of the world wanted him dead. Yet, Bucky knew that Steve had given everything to the world. He had fought every war, sacrificed every personal desire, and carried the weight of the Avengers on his shoulders for years. Bucky understood that Steve deserved a happily ever after, even if it meant Bucky would have to face the modern world without his oldest friend. That is the ultimate expression of love, letting someone go so they can be whole. The transition of the shield to Sam Wilson is also tied into this silent understanding. Many fans wondered why Steve didn't give the shield to Bucky, his oldest friend and fellow super soldier. But within the context of their secret code and shared history, it makes perfect sense. Bucky didn't want the shield. He wanted a life without conflict. He had spent decades as a tool of war, and the shield is a symbol of a duty that never ends. By giving the shield to Sam, Steve was ensuring that the mantle would continue with someone who represented the best of the new world, while simultaneously freeing Bucky from the burden of being a symbol. It was Steve's final gift to Bucky, the chance to just be Bucky Barnes again. This narrative thread brings a new layer of meaning to the entire Captain America trilogy. Every time they fought, every time they risked their lives for one another, they were moving toward this final goodbye. The tragedy of their story isn't that they were separated by time, it's that they were the only ones who could truly understand what they had lost. The world sees Captain America as a legend, but Bucky sees a kid who once hid behind trash can lids in an alleyway. That perspective is irreplaceable. When Steve left, a part of the 1940s died with him, leaving Bucky as the last living witness to a world that no longer exists. The silence on that platform in Endgame speaks volumes about the maturity of their friendship. There was no need for a long, dramatic speech or a tearful embrace. A simple repetition of a 70-year-old joke was enough to convey everything that needed to be said. "Don't do anything stupid" meant "I love you, I'm going to miss you, and I hope you finally find what you're looking for." And the response, "You're taking all the stupid with you," meant "I know, I'm ready for you to go, and I'll be okay." It is a masterclass in subtle storytelling, proving that sometimes the most important things are said in the spaces between the lines. As we look toward the future of the MCU and Bucky's continued journey, the shadow of Steve Rogers will always be present, but not as a weight. It will be a foundation. Bucky is now a man who has fulfilled his promise to his friend. He has found a way to live in the present, to make amends for his past, and to find a new purpose. The code they shared served its purpose. It allowed them to say goodbye without the finality of death, turning a mission into a legacy. It reminds us that even in a universe of infinite possibilities, some connections are so deep that not even time and space can truly sever them. The quantum platform wasn't just a piece of machinery, it was a doorway to a life Steve had earned 100 times over. And Bucky was the gatekeeper, the one who stood watch to ensure his friend made it through. It is a testament to the character of Bucky Barnes that he could stand there, heartbreaking, and still smile because he knew his brother was finally going home. That is the real heroism of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, not the snapping of fingers or the throwing of shields, but the quiet courage it takes to let go of the people you love so they can finally find peace. This secret code between Steve and Bucky invites us to rewatch their entire journey through a new lens. It makes the ending of the first Avenger more poignant and the reunion in the Winter Soldier more powerful. It shows that their story was always about two people trying to find their way home, and in the end, they both succeeded. Steve in the past he missed, and Bucky in the future he was gifted. The stupid code was the final knot in a thread that had been woven through nearly a century of history. And once it was tied, the story of the original Captain America was truly complete. Ultimately, the legacy of Steve and Bucky is a reminder of the power of shared experience. They are the personification of the idea that we are defined by the people who truly know us, not our titles, our powers, or our mistakes, but our history. Bucky knew the truth because he was the only one who had lived through the reality that created Steve Rogers. He didn't need a quantum explanation. He just needed to hear a familiar phrase to know that the long war was finally over. And as the sun set on that quiet field, two kids from Brooklyn finally finished their longest fight, leaving behind a world that would never forget their names, but could never truly understand the depth of their bond.